another episode of Qué Onda. I'm Dr. Mari Castañeda, and it's so wonderful to have you all here joining us. Today we have Lydia Rivera-Early, who is currently the Executive Director of Government Relations and Springfield Partnerships at the UMass Amherst Springfield Center. And I'm excited for the conversation we're going to have and to hear more about the work that she's doing there. So welcome, Lydia.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity and having me here today.
Absolutely. So before we jump into the work that you're doing at the Springfield Center, which I'm actually really excited to hear, and I know that your position is a new position as well, and so I'd love for you to share a little bit about what inspired the creation of that position as well. I wanted to hear more about first your personal story. So how did you get to where you're at? I mean, you could have chosen any career, you could have chosen any other path, but you choose a particular path that leads you here. So what is it about this kind of work that inspired you to do it? How did you get to this place? Because I think so many people want to hear that story of how do we get to these professional positions and really leadership, for what you're doing.
Let me just start by saying that I attended college in a non-traditional way after just being in the workforce since I was very young in age and I was in the business world, which was extremely demanding and fulfilling to a certain extent. I've always been a person that likes to give and that likes to connect. And so at a certain point, I decided that I needed more to be fulfilled, that I needed to challenge myself. One of my major goals was to prove to myself that I could attend college and that I could receive a degree. Mostly because no one else in my family had done that before. So I wanted to set that example.
So you're a first generation student.
I'm a first generation student. And so also having been a teen mom. So it was important for me to set that foundation for my daughter and to see her see me accomplish that goal, right? So I did. I went to school.
So how old were you when you started undergrad?
I was in my 20s, late 20s, 28 to be exact. And I attended Springfield College. The weekend program is the only program that could accommodate my schedule at the time. I had to actually leave my work in order to be able to attend college. So I went from doing business, being in a very demanding position as a regional CAM, which was like a collection manager for the whole region in the industry that I was in, and ended up going into work for the Springfield Housing Authority as a project coordinator. And so I did my undergrad in 2 years on the weekends, and then I decided that I can do this. I did really well in school while I was there, so why not get my master's? And so I ended up just going right through my master's, and I got my master's in about 1.5 years.
Also in Springfield College?
Also in Springfield College. My undergrad was on human services, and my master's is in organizational management and leadership. And so I put that degree to work. I went back into the Springfield Housing Authority, really set the foundation for the work that I was doing. I was working, helping our tenants become self-sufficient. So I ran a center that provided all kinds of services for the residents, right? And so we provided financial literacy support, we provided computer skills, English as a second language, GED programming. We always included some sort of nutrition and wellness, which is like one of my passions, and helped some of our residents understand that where they were at, which is a stepping stone, it wasn't what they were meant to stay forever, right? And that can be scary a lot of times for the population that we serve.
Well, I'm sure your experience and your modeling, was probably a really important part of also shaping not only your experience afterwards, but even during college as well, right? Bringing all those pieces together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have always used myself as an example to those that I'm servicing. Oftentimes, our people cannot see themselves coming out of their situation that they're in. You know, a lot of times it's just very hard. The system is set up oftentimes to keep us oppressed and in the same scenario, right? So I took a lot of pride in providing those services and in building upon what was already there. And you know, just to see some of the residents that became friends, became co-workers, you know, see them succeed and move on and obtain ownership was just like super amazing.
How did your family respond when you were thinking about going back to school, getting your undergraduate degree, your master's degree, being the first one in your family to go to college? How's been that impact, you know, as well?
So it was kind of bittersweet at the moment when I first was saying that I was going to be attending college, because it was almost like the conversations really never happened, you know, within my family and stuff. And so it was.
Did you grow up in Springfield?
I was raised some part of my life in Puerto Rico, came here when I was going into high school.
Okay.
And so my mom was a single mom, and she was just working hard to provide for our family. And, you know, that was kind of like her focus. And so it was almost like they were proud, but it wasn't until I actually obtained a degree and started to put it to work, like I said, that they were like, wow, like, we are so proud of you. Everything that you're doing, you're setting the presence for this type of goal settings, you know, like there's not gonna be there's an option to go to college anymore, like, you know, for my kids, they had to go to college, you know, and it doesn't always turn out exactly how you envision things to be, but it's been instilled in my kids.
And I know what you mean, because when I went to college, at first my mom would tell me that she's like, ay, pobrecita, no sé si va a poder ir. And like, I don't know if we're going to have the money for her to go. And she has this dream, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen. But also, is she going to come back changed? Is she going to be a different person? Will she be part of the family and the community, and then realize later on, like, oh my gosh, what other opportunities and pathways does this open up that hadn't really been imagined before?
Exactly.
And it seems like that's something very similar that happened with you and your family as well.
Absolutely. Like, you know, as I grow in my career and as a person, and I share the experiences with my family, they're all like so very proud, you know, and they're always like, wow, we look up to you, like, you know, you're an inspiration, you empower us and stuff, which is in turn what I strive to do for everyone that I come in contact with, you know, like just making sure that every time I have an interaction with someone, I try to help them see what's in them, you know, because oftentimes we just don't see it in ourselves.
Do you ever bring any of your family to any of your kind of work events or any of those spaces?
Yes.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Absolutely. And for when you're saying, you know, regarding family and the education and stuff, my husband now, when I went back to school, he was my boyfriend at the time, and he was definitely a like number one supporter. Education for him was what changed his life totally. So I had that support all around.
It makes a huge difference. One time I went to a conference and I brought my family, and there was like 10 of them that came with me. And later on, several years later, a friend of mine was like, where's your family, Mari? Because you roll deep. Like, and where are they? You know? Absolutely. And it's like, it's so important for them to see you in action and doing the work, but also to feel that love and that support and that strength helps you do the work even deeper and even more in a more committed way, because you really see the impact that is not just in your family but the broader community as well, and you see it in their reaction, in their eyes, in their faces, but also in the which they get inspired too.
Absolutely.
You know,
and that's the intention, right? That, you know, we're passing on something to someone else that would then pass it on to the community in itself and those that are around them.
Yeah, and I just love you sharing your story, because I don't think we hear enough of how we come to these spaces, right? How do we come to college? And oftentimes people also assume there's only one pathway, there's only one way of doing it, and you're of course demonstrating absolutely like there's a different way of doing it, and a way to do it that again keeps you whole and centered and committed to the work that you're doing, but also keeping you centered in the community itself.
Absolutely.
You know, as well. And that's really wonderful and beautiful because again, some folks I think sometimes feel like I want to do this, but is it going to pull me away? Is it going to pull me away from my family, from my community, from the things that I really want to do? Are there other models that demonstrate that possibility? And you obviously are really demonstrating that.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. It's taking a long time for me to be able to just open up and say, you know, this is me, this is my story and my journey, right? Because for so many years it was like, oh, she was a teen mom, you know, like oftentimes you're in certain rooms that kind of like frown upon it and stuff, and so I kind of suppressed it for a while and stuff, but then I'm like, I will be doing the people that I'm trying to service a disfavor if I don't share exactly who I am.
Well, and it becomes a superpower. Right? Like people talk about like, that is my superpower. And it's like, it's true because from that you get that strength and that depth, you know, that brings a whole other layer to the work that you're doing. And also that pride, you know, that is so important. And so I'm so glad to hear that now you're open and willing to share that story because it's so critical for so many people to hear and be inspired by, you know, as well. So shifting a little bit, I want to hear more about your new role, which is not so new, but you had it since November, right? November. And so that's still, you know, within
4 months.
It's actually still pretty, right? And so, and I know that it was an important role that they wanted to create in order to really make sure that those partnerships are strengthened. So you're currently the executive director of government relations and Springfield partnerships. So can you share a little bit more about, so what does that mean? And what are the things that you're working on in partnership with other people, both in the center and across, that you're sort of hoping will be sort of fleshed out a little bit more and so forth. And then also just maybe share a little bit of what is the UMass Amherst Springfield Center? Because I think some folks are still confused about what exactly that means. And maybe you could share a little bit from your perspective, what you see as that being embodying.
Yeah. So let me say, before coming to UMass, I was at SDCC for 12 years as the director of community engagement. And prior to that, I worked a lot on workforce development. And so when the opportunity came about and I saw the posting for the UMass Center, I was like, oh my God, like this is the next step in my career and the next step in me being able to expand my reach and give back to the community, right? And do work at a different level. Yeah. And so I was extremely excited going through the whole interview process and stuff, because I really could see like and envision what the center would be like. And so when the center first came to Springfield, when it was first developed, the community was very excited about the potential. And there was great work being done then, but then the pandemic happened and it kind of like shut down everything, just like it did with many other places and projects and programs. So now with Chancellor Reyes being here and stuff, he has envisioned the center again being a pivotal part of the community, right? And not only providing certain services here and here, we want to be embedded in the fabric of the Springfield community, the Holyoke community, Chicopee community, and all greater Springfield area. We feel like there's a disconnect between UMass Amherst and Springfield and all the neighboring cities. It's almost like, you know, oftentimes we're like an afterthought. And so
you know, a friend of mine once called it that there's a divide because there's a tofu curtain that divides, you know, and I think that speaks to just also the ways in which it's imagined, right, in terms of the communities and the university itself, like this real huge disconnect between those, that region and the campus itself, which is part of the region, but yet it's seen as
it's like its own little,
living in its tofu island.
Exactly. Absolutely
separate.
So the work that we have been doing right now is just really re-engaging the community, listening, trying to see what it is that the community thinks we are. What do they think we should be, right? And bringing all of this information back and sitting down with it and processing it and bringing people from different areas within UMass to kind of sit and say, okay, this is the information that we're getting. This is what we envision us being. How do we bridge those? How do we bring them together? So one of my main initiatives right now has been just really doing that, right? Either re-engaging old partners, creating new ones, and trying to mend relationships that probably didn't, go so well before. Also letting people know our commitment. And I have been really putting in work to work with faculty members from all areas of the university and seeing again what is the center and stuff like that. So one of our main priorities will be to have the Springfield Center be a community-based research center. Right? There's so much work that is done. We're like a major research university, right? Oftentimes the work is being done in silos. People are just coming into the community, doing their project and leaving, which could leave a very bad taste in people's mouth, and organizations that are like, wait a minute, you showed up at my door, you said you were doing this, and what happened after. So we want to be very mindful about that. And
it really seems to be changing the mindset from treating the community as a laboratory, right?
Exactly.
This is not a laboratory.
Exactly.
This is a space of reciprocity and partnership. So how can we work together to create a win-win situation where there's work that needs to be done in communities who want to partner with the university, faculty and students and staff, while at the same time the faculty themselves are also very interested in really wanting to put the best use, either grants or knowledge, or even students that are interested in developing skill sets and so forth, but working together to be able to make that happen versus sort of plopping in and then plopping out and having no sense of accountability or engagement, which is what makes people very upset.
Exactly.
Like,
and so
where'd you go?
Accountability is a big piece, and we want to be like very mindful once again in the information that we're putting out there, because we want to make sure whatever it is that we're saying we're going to do, that we're going to live up to those expectations that then are going to be brought upon us. And so we're doing that again.
How are you mending those relationships? How are you going back into those spaces and having those conversations? Like how are you doing that?
So it is funny because I have been in so many different boards. I have worked in so many different projects within the community. So I do know a lot of people. And, like one of the main things I did was a meet and greet breakfast with Chancellor Reyes. I wanted them to hear from him exactly what his vision is. And we brought together maybe 35 to 40 leaders in the community that are really doing the work and that understand that sometimes the work could get very funky, and sometimes some of the relationships do kind of shift, right? So
and they take time
too.
Exactly.
So I feel like I have a pretty good relationship with most people in the community, and they trust my word, they trust my work. So I think people have been extremely welcoming and open to the possibilities. We did that. We're now gonna be hosting a kind of forums per se in April, and we're inviting different organizations, not your typical everyday organizations that are at the table, grassroots organizations, staff, faculty, students. Like, we want everyone at the table. We want to make sure we hear everyone's voices before we really start implementing and, and saying this is what it is. I feel like everybody's got to have an input in what takes place. And like going into the schools, reaching out to the earlier grades. Once kids are in high school, it's kind of like too late to reach to them. And so just going back to the drawing board, like, these are things that have happened. We just got them, again, they're happening, and there's not a centralized base, that's gathering all this information and that's saying, okay, we're doing this at this scale. So that's really the map that we're trying now to put together.
What do you see as some of the goals that you would like to see? Like, what are some of the things you'd like to see happen as a result of these, sort of coming together forums, listening sessions, restarting those relationships again, connecting with faculty as well and students? Like, what is it that you would, in your sort of like heart of hearts or ideal, like, would love to see happen?
Like, work so towards? For me, first of all, I want to have a vibrant center, right? We want to have traffic. We want to make sure that we're developing new
like
trainings.
Good traffic.
Yeah, good traffic. I want to walk in there and see classrooms full of students. We're looking into workforce development, which sometimes kind of like is missed. We need to understand that not everyone is gonna apply to go to the University of Massachusetts at for a 4-year degree, so we gotta like build pathways. I see potentially a bridge program, maybe like a 13-year, like kind of like getting some kids acclimated to what the work will be before you transition into UMass Amherst. Like, there's just so many ideas that we have been connecting with different campuses about, that I see happening. And like, the first thing right now is developing positions that are going to help that plan come to fruition.
You mean staff positions in the center?
Staff positions in the center, like, we'll be talking with HR now. We're going to be talking to advisors who potentially house them there. We have a position that just been approved and is posted. And that's just exciting, because it's like, we're not just talking about this. We're making the necessary steps to bring in the change that we want in order to provide the services that need to be provided.
And how do you mentioned that also you were connecting with the broader Springfield region, so Holyoke and Chicopee as well, and in addition to Springfield. And I was just wondering, how does that partnership happen, or how did that reach happen with regards to stepping even beyond the city, that particular city, in terms of Springfield beyond?
Well, again, for some reason, everyone that really knows me always says that I'm just such a connector, that I can bring people together and stuff. So I just don't have no problem with like just searching, who's in this position that is critical for me to connect with, right? And then passing on that information, having that initial meeting and connecting that person with someone else that's really doing the work, right? Just the other day I attended an event, and I was being introduced to someone, and they're like, oh, I've heard about you, I've been trying to connect with you, and he's a city council person in Holyoke. So, we immediately started talking about UMass and UMass commitment to Holyoke, and how does that happen? How do kids get enrolled? Do they get accepted? So a lot of valid points were brought up from his perspective, and those are conversations that we are internally having. So we know that there are some concerns about even those good students, right, that have above average grades, and how they feel like UMass is not a reachable place for them and stuff. So oftentimes they look at other places, but they really don't even explore the opportunity.
Yeah,
So-
absolutely. And it, having done a lot of community-based work myself over the years since I've, been at UMass now for 24 years as a faculty member. Yeah, a long time.
Yeah, that's
I was going to go back to
awesome.
Los Angeles and, I've been still here. But part of it is because the community is there's so much going on in so many wonderful ways that it just sort of pulls you in. But one of the things that I learned over the years, that talking to especially high school students and middle school students when I was involved as a faculty advisor for Student Bridges, was that a lot of the family members, and I understood that because same thing with my family, being first generation college student, didn't know, what does it mean to go to college? What's it going to be impact? How are they going to come back to home? You know what I mean? Like there's all these things, right? But a lot of times it felt that it just seemed not only unachievable because it seemed so far away, but it just didn't always seem welcoming. Like it didn't seem like a place that will welcome the fact that I'm going to code switch in English and Spanish, and I'm going to bring my family sometimes to events, and I'm going to, bring my full Latina self into these spaces. And will this space really be open and embrace that, as opposed to, you're not supposed to be like that.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to wear color. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, we love color, So, like, as an example. And that's just like, again, a very minor thing, but it actually speaks volumes.
Absolutely.
Because then you feel like maybe you don't fit in or belong in these spaces. So I think that the university, and I think a lot of the colleges and universities in areas, have really tried to make some strides and some efforts to really make sure that when students are coming from the communities that are traditionally not always been at those institutions, how do we make sure that the students feel welcomed, embraced, included, and not just them, but their families as well, and their communities? Because when we come, we roll deep. Like, right? We don't come by ourselves, we come with the familias, we come with our histories, our heritage, our languages. And so how do we make sure that that also gets included? And I think starting at the Springfield Center, I think is a great way of really ensuring that.
Yeah, and reaching out to the students, again, early on, and including the families, the parents. I've heard Chancellor Reyes a couple of times mention the abuelita who raised the kid, So it's just like, just being open-minded and understanding and knowing that if something is not working, if we're doing something, right, to invite the community and we don't see the community there, what are we missing, right? Let's go back and let's see what it is that we're missing and try it in a different way, and seeing what the results are. Oftentimes we try something and we beat that thing down and it's not working. Like, instead of just going back to the drawing board and assessing that and just an example of what you said with rolling deep and stuff. My son is actually going into a lot of college visits. It's just been crazy. And just the other day we were heading into Holy Cross, and my husband was like, let's take my grandson. And I was like, no, I don't think we should take him, and he's like, come on, this is us. This is, so it was really great to see that from his perspective as well, because we have been in this frame of mind for the longest time that we have to make sure we don't do anything that will make us look in a different light, right? But again, like you said, this is who we are. And this is what we represent. And this is, when you get me, this is what you get.
Exactly. And so how do we make sure that our institutions, our universities, our centers are really reflective of that and really embracing that and being open to that, as opposed to, you need to change. It's like, nope, these spaces actually need to change, And so I'm so glad to hear that the forum is happening and that those conversations are taking place, because that is how we shift things. So one last thing I wanted to ask you is, how has it been engaging with the faculty, to get them to also shift the ways in which that maybe some of them are thinking about things? I'm sure there's many of them that are like, let's go, and like totally on board and excited and eager. I know that I see myself as one of those faculty, but how do you see other folks that sort of thinking about these issues in these particular ways?
So right now, for the most part, my experience have been nothing short of great. I've had, I would say now, 4 meetings. We meet every third Thursday of the month at the center, and the invitation is open for anyone. So every time we have a session, if there's a new person, I'm always telling them, please invite others, because clearly I don't know too many people, right, at the university. And but it's been great. Like, there have been concerns, there really have been, but they're not concerns or objections that people like, no, this is not gonna work. Everybody's pretty open-minded. And some of the faculty have said, well, we've tried this before, what's going to be different now, kind of thing. And so, but what's different is the action. Things are already happening, so it's like
and also the difference is that you're there, Lydia. Let's be real, because I think we haven't always had folks that really like understand the community and advocate for it and have that history and connection. And you being there, that's game changer. Like that's a whole different context, and that makes a big difference, as well.
Well, I appreciate that you're saying that and stuff, but for me, like, really, like, my approach is let's roll our sleeves up and let's get to work, know. So I feel like, again, there have been some wins already. Just the fact that position is being created, who's gonna be pretty much like a liaison to me and the faculty side, that's huge. That is certainly huge.
And that's a new role that hadn't been there
just
before.
Another position that was created, because there is an investment, there is a belief that the need is there, and we want to fulfill that need. And
do you see other universities that are models that you sort of would like to see, like they're doing it in ways that are innovative and interesting and be great to learn from them and so forth?
So it's funny that you say that, because UConn right now is contracting with a private developer that is actually gonna have dorms in downtown Hartford.
Oh, wow.
I mean, like, it's a model that I look at and I'm like, man, this could be Springfield. And I know it's definitely early on, and there's a lot of things that will have to happen before something like this would, but I think it's possible. It's possible. And as long as you can envision it and you have that drive and you can find those key players,
todo es posible.
Exacto.
Right. But that's the thing, is seeing possibilities and saying, okay, so of course we don't cut and paste necessarily, but what could work here?
What could work? Because not only do they either having the residence for students and stuff, they're actually also implementing other programming that's going to be downtown, so again, I think we have to look at what the need is when we're talking about economic development, workforce development, all of it. What works? What do we need to bring in? What are the deliverables?
Well, I'm so excited that you're in this role. I mean, I've been hearing, which is why I wanted to invite you, because I've been hearing so many amazing things about you as well. Thank you. And so I just wanted to make sure that there was a conversation, between us about what was going on, because I feel like it's important for people to hear the amazing, great work that you're doing, but also your own journey, how you got here, and how that also then is impacting the work that you're doing. So thank you, Lydia, for making time. I know you're probably heading to another meeting and something else going on.
Thank
but
you.
Gracias, de veras.
De verdad también, muchas gracias, and I look forward to working with you.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for Qué Onda. Again, this is Dr. Mari Castañeda and Lidya Rivera-Early here, who is our, again, Executive Director of Government Relations and Springfield Partnerships. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you, everyone, for joining us. Adios.